So here's just kind of a random thought. So Pete Buttigieg has been trending on Twitter. He was on Fox News Sunday yesterday with Bret Baier, and he was talking about, a variety of subjects, but one of the subjects that trended was Bret Baier asked him why Tesla wasn't invited to the White House for, the big three automakers were there talking about lowering emissions in electric vehicles and whatnot. And Pete Buttigieg says, well, they weren't invited to the tailpipe emissions meeting because, well, Teslas don't have tailpipes. So Twitter goes crazy. Oh, cute Pete Buttigieg. He's so cute. He's just so wonderful. Oh, my gosh. And then Pete Buttigieg says that infrastructure is directly tied to racism, that there is literally racism built into some of our infrastructure. And, of course, Twitter goes wild for Pete Buttigieg. And, with Kamala Harris's tanked ratings, which was no surprise to those of us who've been following Kamala Harris. I don't know why this is a big surprise to the DNC. Her team is now scrambling, trying to rehab her image, trying to figure out what went wrong. Why don't the American people like Kamala Harris? Well, because they never did. That is why she couldn't even make it to a primary. Kamala Harris, once Tulsi Gabbard took her out, it was just exposed as being somebody who doesn't really have leadership skills, doesn't really have a lot of ideas, probably a great prosecutor, maybe a great senator, maybe. But, and I'm not talking policy and stuff like that. I get it, super establishment, yada, yada. But nonetheless, not a good vice president, certainly not somebody who could then go and parlay that into presidency, which is really ultimately what the Democratic Party clearly had in mind. It's really questionable whether or not Joe Biden can live out an entire term, highly questionable whether or not he can go into a second term. Something I've always speculated was that Joe Biden would get in. Then after 2 years, it would need to be at least 2 years, 2.5, maybe even 3 years. Kamala, he would resign, step aside, or say he's, taking a break. Kamala Harris would then step in. She'd get all the photo ops and would then, get looking like she's in the Oval Office. She would get that advantage so that when she runs in 2024, it's difficult to beat an incumbent. I know we've seen this a couple times, but in the last election and George H.W. Bush, but typically an incumbent has an advantage. So if Kamala Harris could be inserted as that incumbent, then she would have an advantage going into 2024. However, people just don't like Kamala. They never really liked her in the primary. They don't like her now. People don't like Kamala. So what are they going to do? Well, Pete Buttigieg to the rescue. Don't know how well this is going to work, but interestingly, when Kamala Harris was kicked out of the primary by Tulsi, and I get it, Kamala resigned from running, whatever, but, she would have kept going had Tulsi not taken her out. So when Kamala stepped aside, we should say, all of the resources that Kamala was given, those establishment Clinton resources. Hillary Clinton opened up her Rolodex to Kamala Harris. She had been helping fundraise for Kamala Harris well before Kamala Harris even announced that she was running. She received Hillary Clinton's foreign policy team, a lot of her senior advisors. A lot of that went to Kamala. When Kamala exited the race, a lot of those resources went over to Pete Buttigieg. He became the establishment golden boy that they were then banking on. So they gave it all to Pete Buttigieg. Remember, then he suddenly was the one to watch, and he suddenly was rising up in the ratings, and he was, getting this mayor was suddenly, on everybody's radar. Well, then Pete Buttigieg just turned out he just doesn't do well in the South. Black people don't really like Pete Buttigieg. They figured there was a lot of questions about racism, some of his past policies, and he just couldn't get that Southern vote. And so ultimately, even though they used Pete Buttigieg to try to take out Bernie Sanders and kneecap Bernie Sanders, ultimately in the end, Joe Biden was the one that everybody rallied around. I think the DNC kind of realized, we just got to go back with good old Joe and keep our fingers crossed that the guy can make it. Hide him away in a basement because of COVID, and that'll be the way we play this out. And so, everybody rallied around Joe, as you know the rest of the story. And then he chose Kamala Harris, and it was like, oh, really? We're going to try this again, huh? And it's not going well. It isn't going well. People don't like Kamala. So now with all this trending Pete Buttigieg love fest going on Twitter, it leaves me wondering if the DNC is once again trying to shape Pete Buttigieg to be the person that people like. Maybe they're trying to rehab his sort of his ties and relationship with the Black community in the South, having him say things like infrastructure, roads are literally have racism built into them, trying to rehab him a bit to where they could replace Kamala with Pete Buttigieg. Possible. It's really possible. I don't know how they're going to do that without Kamala Harris having some sort of manufactured crisis. I don't think they could just say, all right, Kamala, you're out, Pete Buttigieg is in. But I certainly could see a scenario where Kamala comes out and says, I'm going to have to step aside. Unfortunately, I have drama in my life or family or health issues or who knows what it is that she's going to say that she needs to do. And in comes Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And remember, Pete Buttigieg and Kamala Harris were the only two candidates who ran in the primary who ended up with positions in the administration. Obviously, Kamala Harris is vice president. Pete Buttigieg, mayor. Comes from nowhere, except maybe the CIA, right? That's a speculation. Ends up getting in there. And so, there's a lot of questions here. Will Pete Buttigieg be the new Kamala? Are they going to try this again? Do they think this would work? If it didn't work the first time with Kamala, what makes them think Pete Buttigieg's, that his image could be rehabbed if they couldn't rehab Kamala's image with the American people? So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but it could very well be that Pete Buttigieg has moved in, and then they probably see that Pete Buttigieg would be actually someone who could take over the administration early and then would be the one sitting in the Oval Office with all those photo ops and would be the one that would be able to go against Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or whoever ends up getting the Republican nomination in 2024. Quite frankly, I do think Pete Buttigieg would do better than Kamala against either of those two candidates. So I think that's a good gamble, I suppose. But yet to be seen how that goes. Or maybe Joe Biden does end up running again with Pete Buttigieg next to him. And then into his second term, if he gets it, Pete Buttigieg then takes over and goes from there. So interesting stuff to pay attention to. But it does look like they're rehabbing Pete Buttigieg and potentially grooming him to be the new vice president to take over for Kamala. So be sure to watch that. All right, guys, be sure to join me on Locals. I do have a Locals community. That is where I could speak more freely away from big tech and establishment people. So if you check me out on Locals, that is where I can speak more freely. You could follow me there for free. There is a premium option as well for extra content. Check me out. That link is down below. Also, I've been on the Hills Rising this week. It's been having a lot of fun these last couple of weeks. Actually, I've been guest co-hosting, having a lot of fun over there. It's obviously a very different format for me, but be sure to check it out. They do not tell me what to say. I can assure you of that. I am not censored or limited by anything. I'm only limited in time constraints. Just the format is different. So it's just difficult to kind of get your piece in there. So that's the only limiting. But otherwise, they do not direct me. They do not censor me. So check out The Hills Rising, guest co-hosting for the rest of this week at least. And if you have any questions, comments, please email me, kim@kimiverson.com. If you'd like to see more of my content, especially the uncensored kind, sign up for my Locals community. Locals is where we can freely discuss topics that are often censored or limited by big tech. Not only will you get bonus segments not seen on YouTube, but you'll also gain access to my casual behind-the-scenes live streams, informative postings stacked with valuable information, and even just random fun pics and videos from my personal life. It's a way to support my show while getting more content. It's $5 a month for premium access and free for others. So go to my Locals page at kimiverson.locals.com.